Hi, welcome to the channel where we provide an alternative view to the common narrative. Today is actually Friday, the 24th of February, and I would like to discuss the speech of Putin that he delivered on the 21st of February to the Russian people and the parliament. Now, I'm going to provide an alternative view to what the common narrative or the common interpretation of the speech is. So if you are interested in a different view, please continue watching. Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today's topic is basically the speech that Putin gave to the Russian parliament and the Russian people on the 21st of February this year. Now, I've read some comments, I've read some articles, and some analysis of his speech. Most of them are basically sort of anecdotal, but I'm not totally sure if that's the correct English word. But basically, it's a summary of the main points. Those are more the summaries of what the speech contained. Then there were some pro-Russian analysts that tried to make sense of his speech, and they were looking for things that basically were not there. I'm not totally sure who it was, but I think it was Larry Johnson that said that a certain, basically a red line was crossed, or that Putin basically explained what the red line would be, but he looked from it from a military point of view. Other people say basically he said it was a brilliant speech, which I totally agree with. And basically he said everything that he already said before. And unfortunately, I cannot agree with that. So I first started off listening to watch a YouTube video with a live translation, which is sometimes very difficult to understand because it's the translator. I don't know how those guys get it right. That's an incredible difficult job. I mean, they have to do it on the fly. They have to listen to what he says, then translate it, and then in a delayed action, basically tell it for us in English. And I actually watched two of them. The one was a man, I think it was Sky News, and the other one was a woman, and that was somebody else, but the man had the best interpretation. And as I've listened, I came to a certain conclusion. And then I decided, no, this is not good enough. I'm going to read the translation, the official script that is published on Kremlin's webpage, where you can read basically a transcript of all the speeches. And in this case, it was Putin's. Now, he started off, the first part, basically, he described the situation that is happening in the Donbass and with NATO and with America and so forth and so forth. And if you listen to it superficially, then you will come to the conclusion, yeah, you see, I said everything before. But if you try to analyze, or at least listen a little bit more carefully, especially if you read between the lines, and try to compile a comprehensive picture, then you have to come to the conclusion that there is a red line that has been crossed. It's not a red line that you usually expect in terms of military, from a military point of view. No. It has been a red line that has been crossed by the West. Now, I've talked many times about this, that Putin always wanted to be part of Europe since he basically came to prominence and power. And he always believed that Russia would be part of Europe and of the Western Hemisphere. or their Western culture. And rightfully, it is actually where Russia belongs. And he has showed immense patience, immense goodwill, and sometimes, in my opinion, a naive belief in the authenticity or the respect of the West, or for what it stands for. And my biggest example was basically that he tolerated 8 years worth of bombing of the Donbass regions, the two Minsk agreements never being honored by the West and by Germany and France, and the rhetoric that the Americans always talked about, that basically, yes, Russia is the enemy, and etc. and etc. And for some other reason, he was patient, and he still believed that there would be a means of creating a peaceful solution to the problem, and that Russia will become part of Europe still and be integrated. And now, this is the red line that I'm talking about, that the red line has been crossed. The first, basically, 20 minutes of his speech, or 30 minutes of his speech, the way that Putin talks about the West makes it very clear that he has given up on the West. There is no more turning back. He has lost all faith, all trust, all wishes to become part of the Western world. He has decided to move Russia effectively away from Europe, and it will be very, very difficult to get Russia ever back into the fold or into certain agreements with the West. He also expressed that he's always prepared to deal with him, yes. He will negotiate with him, yes. But he would be very, very cautious about that. And he has no faith that the West will honor their agreements in any case. We have now basically the revelations of Merkel and what's that French guy? Yeah, got his name again. Forget it. In any case, basically that the West has lied with the Minsk agreements. Then you can look at Bush's and Obama's withdrawal from 2 nuclear treaties, important treaties. And now the Americans have also not abided by the START treaty and allowed Russian inspectors to visit, basically, as per the agreement, American sites. And in a speech later on, which I'm just going to address here now, is that basically Russia or Putin has withdrawn now or suspended the START agreement. And the START agreement is the last nuclear disarmament or nuclear arms control agreement that was still valid. It has been elapsed. It has been extended by Biden, I believe, till 2026, with the intent by the Russians to always restart the negotiations on that, but there's no willingness on the Americans. And this is now 2023, and it takes some time apparently to do these negotiations. And with the withdrawal or the suspension of that, there is no hope that the START agreement will be renegotiated and extended beyond 2026. It doesn't really matter because the Americans are not really honoring the terms of the agreement. And also, just as a sideline, in a speech, Putin also stated clearly that the Russian nuclear forces have to become ready to do nuclear tests because the Americans have developed new technology, more modern weapons, and he expects the Americans to start testing again. So although Russia will not start the first nuclear test, if the Americans proceed with their tests, then Russia will also do the necessary nuclear tests. So as you can see, the nuclear armament or disarmament period is now over. And Russia is basically now full on restarting their deterrence, nuclear deterrence options. But that's beside the point. That is just a little bit later on. So he also said that basically whatever he finally acknowledges, and this is like rare. I mean, usually the speeches of Putin and Lavrov and so on were very, very diplomatic, and they omitted certain stuff. But now it is clearly stated that the Russians now know that America objective is to destroy Russia. He finally saw through that, and he finally now made it public. He probably had it in the back of his mind, in his private concerns, but in his public, finally now he made it clear. And that is now a conclusion. And he's not going to look back. So whatever is happening is, he will progress and ensure the security of Russia itself. And he clearly stated that the more weapons the West pumps into Ukraine, and the longer, the further the missiles that are delivered can travel, the further Russia must progress to the West in order to protect their territories. But unfortunately, in my opinion, there cannot be any end, because if you look at the current map and you look at Donbass and you look at Zaporizhzhia and the Kherson area, it's still only a small part of Ukraine. And if there's now peace agreement and so on, then Russia will be stuck with that area, and effectively it wouldn't have gained anything. Nuclear weapons or standard weapons can still be placed in Ukraine at a very short distance from Moscow, and the threat will not be basically removed. So Russia, in my opinion, as I've stated many times before, has to move east, and it has to move east to maybe to the whole Ukraine. So this story about long distance missiles, that's not going to happen. That cannot happen. And if he does that, then unfortunately the whole operation, the special military operation, was a waste of money, resources, and manpower and lives. So whatever Russia or Putin seeks in the security of Russia, or the security guarantees, he has to conquer the whole of Ukraine, and maybe even threaten the missile installations in Romania and in Poland. And then enforce basically a mutual, how do they always say? Not divergent, divisible security agreement. And that's the only way how Russia will ever achieve that type of objective. And if you have listened a little bit further on, it talks about the military production, the military industrial complex in Russia, and that they're going to boost the technology significantly. Apart from that, they already have weapon systems that far exceed the capabilities of the Western nations. They're still going to improve the weaponry, and this weaponry and command structure and operational management will be clearly upgraded and updated and developed according to the latest experience that they gained in the Donbass against Western weapons. And as I always said, nobody is really dumb or intelligent. Both sides have very intelligent people, scientists, engineers, and military commanders, and so forth, and even politicians. Even if you don't want to recognize in the West, there are some very clever people. The only problem is in the West, they are not listened to. But Putin has specifically stated that the country must support the military industrial complex. And again, he hammered on the loyalty, the patriotism, the support that the people must give to the protection of the fatherland, and resist any of these Western influences, develop the industry. But most important, he actually stated that as well. Don't make the mistakes as what the Soviet Union has done, gotten into an arms race, and then neglected the rest of the economy. He specifically introduced a number of development plans and money and organizations in order to support local manufacturing capability. That means the normal economy. And so what they, and also the transport corridors to the east of Asia. So you can see this was the red line that I'm always talking about. There's a clear shift away from the west to the east, and to anybody else, means to the south as well. Everything away from the west. No more trust. No more unnecessary effort and energy spent on trying to convince the west of the Russians' good intentions. No more cooperation with them. No more allowing their companies to get a foothold into Russia without the necessary control mechanisms. He has previously stated that if Western companies want to become back to Russia or the Russian economy, they will be evaluated and approved on an individual basis. No Western company will just enter Russia and then start doing business. That's not going to be like that. So it's going to be very, very controlled. And then the third thing, and you have to praise Putin very much for that. Now, I always believed, and you can look it up, I never want to be a soldier in an American army, because the American army treats their soldiers, their veterans, and their injured soldiers like crap. Once they got something out of you and got some fighting out of you, and you are either injured or whatever, then you are nothing for them anymore. And there's many talks about the American VAs that is not performing as it should be done, and old veterans that have been neglected. But not Putin. On the contrary, he has mobilized, or not mobilized, motivated the Russian population to a large extent to support the soldiers who are protecting and fighting for their country, Russia, and the Donbass, because he considers the Donbass, well, it is officially part of Russia, but he specifically mentions Donbass as a part of Russia and Russian territory, and that they deserve the same as the rest of the Russian populations. And basically, the population understands why Russia is now has done the special military operation. They understand they are fighting for the existence of their country. Putin tries to make the connotation between the Second World War, the Great Patriotic War, and so on, in order to motivate the people. But it doesn't stop with the motivation as well, and the appreciations for the soldiers that are laying down their lives in the name of protection. He also praised the families of the fallen soldiers. He is going to establish a special fund that's going to support these fallen soldiers' families and veterans. He's going to take special care of these people and reward them for the sacrifice they have done. They're going to support the families, the children, education, basically everything. They're going to give them better housing, subsidized housing, whatever they can. And he's implementing these special operations and tasking the government to really assist military veterans. So he was planning, and he has now made plans to look after his troops and his soldiers and their families. Something which the West doesn't do. Something which America definitely doesn't do. And then basically, okay, before I even go, even the people that kind of work in the military industrial complex and the engineers, the scientists and so on, even their family is going to be subsidized and looked cared after because they are forming a very important part of the whole defense system. And then basically that's about half of the speech. The rest of the speech is basically how Putin's economy has sustained the sanctions against the West, that a lot of new companies have opened up new types of products, increased their production, in fact, to such a level that the Russian economy only decreased last year by 2.2%. Inflation is like 4.6%, and by the second quarter of this year, Putin and his ministers believe that inflation in Russia will be down to 4%. Unemployment is also at a record low. Production capability from agricultural is so that they're going to export like 60 million tons of grain this year, making Russia one of the largest exporters of grain. So apart from this, and then he talks about, well, I'm not going to bore you much about that, with the economic development, his plans for the economy, his motivation and support for small businesses and medium enterprise businesses, basically support for technology, training of even the veterans after this SMO to obtain degrees in science and military and etc., etc. So basically what he wants, you can see the red line has been crossed. That is Russia, no more going to the West, to Europe. There. Look after yourself, build up your own economy, build up your own technology, improve and enlarge your military industrial complex, your military itself, the quality of the weapon systems, everything that goes with it, but don't neglect the rest of the economy. Make the rest of the economy self-sufficient and world-class so it can become a competitor in the rest of the world and trade with the rest of the world that is not as currently friendly with Russia. And we are talking about all these institutions like the BRICS and ASEAN and I can't even CTO and stuff like that, organizations. And as we also know, Russia has an excellent relationship with China. And it seems to me that finally there was now a report written by the foreign minister, the Chinese foreign minister, in a language that he has never spoken before. And it seems to me that China now also is waking up, or not only waking up, they should have been aware of that, but have finally decided that's it. There's no point in negotiating with the West. So the Chinese are finally getting there where Putin has already been. And these two countries will then work together. And since they are the powerhouses of the world currently, they have a huge potential. So basically, this is what the speech of Putin was all about. 100% declaration of being anti-West, totally acknowledging the intent of America and NATO. Put it aside. Totally preparing itself for a total onslaught on Russia. A total mistrust in the West. Oh yeah, and I actually forgot about that. He was talking about the culture of the West and where it has gone in the last couple of years, say in the last 20, 30 years. And he specifically said that he is going to protect the Russian culture against the influence and the destructive nature of the Western culture, like transgender, breakdown of the family, and family values, the attack against the belief in religious institutions. And he actually mentions, I didn't actually know about that, that the West is already, the church or religions are already considering and trying to make God or Jesus Christ as a non-gender, as a binary, you know, not as a man or a woman. And it's more, no, it's not bordering on the ridiculous. It is ridiculous. So, again, previously they wanted the West and the Western culture. Now the red line has crossed and they said, no, we don't want it. And actually, in a certain sense, Russia can thank the West for all the sanctions. Because if the Western social media is not there, then they're not going to be influenced by all the bad things that go with it. The wokeness, the cancer culture, the YouTube videos. They will have their own in-house type of social media that is focused on their culture, and hopefully the people are there, the Russians that are currently now being attacked by the West or prevented by the West, it might decide that, hey, we're rather going to join the Russian social media, because those people on the Russian media, social media, or have our culture. And Putin even expressed his view that even those people that, the Russian people itself, that want to destroy or hate their fatherland and wants to transform to the West, the narrative, and sell their souls for basically for that, then they should do it. The Russian government is not going to be, he called it a witch hunt, but he's not going to focus on prosecuting or attacking or limiting these people. These people must live with their own conscience. So he's going to allow these people, but he's basically, he's going to counter cancel culture against these woke people, if you want to see it like that. Well, that is basically the message. This is how I see it. It was a serious speech. For me, it was finally the awakening of Putin and Russia to the realities of the West, the hypocrisy, the lies, the doublespeak, doing one thing and saying another thing. They're clearly showing the intent of Russia as being the enemy and their wishes of the intent to destroy Russia. How more blatant can you be? Who believes all this nice talk, diplomatic still talk, when the action is done? It's like now again. So America recognized the one China policy, but it's going to quadruple the troops in Taiwan, the American troops in Taiwan. Why? I don't understand that. So you do that, but you do the opposite with the other hand. Sorry. So I'm very glad for that. I was impressed with the speech itself. I'm going to leave a link to that, so you can read the transcription. It's a fairly long item, but if you're interested. And that's my story for today. So if you like what you heard and you haven't subscribed, subscribe to the channel or tell your friend, spread the word, press the like button, ring the bell. Until next time, cheers.